Today, this afternoon, it's a bit of a blustery, windy day. Not too much, just a bit as we can see in the trees, in the shrubs, and the plants. The wind gusts and moves not hard. It's not gales, it's not difficult to stand, it's not scary in any way. But it does remind us of the power of the wind and some of the effect that can have on us and on plants and on the world around us. That sense of something pushing against us. It reminds me that many years ago, Kim and I lived in California, Half Moon Bay, and just a little way south of us was some of the redwood forests. And those redwood trees, some cases up to 300 feet tall, majestic and beautiful and strong, and with those trunks as wide and massive as they are. But in so doing, we also learned about those trees, because those trees, as we start to understand, as tall as they are, an amazing thing about that height is how shallow the roots are. Those roots are just a few feet underground. And in normal circumstances, a tree with that height, with that kind of shallow roots, would be very susceptible to the wind simply pushing as a lever to knock that tree down, but they don't. And the reason they don't is those trees, the roots all intertwine with each other. They have to survive in a sense of community. Those roots intertwine, and as they give strength to each other, creating a large mat. It's also how they absorb the moisture and the nutrients that come down in those shallow roots are right there to be able to take that water and be able to grow. But if there's a storm, those trees support each other. That reminds me of a text that I've used occasionally at some weddings and other circumstances. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9, beginning there. Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up the other, but woe to the one who is alone and falls, and does not have another to help. Again, if two lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? And though one might prevail against another, two will withstand one. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. You can see how that applies both to a wedding, but also to much of our own lives. We together are stronger than we could be individually. We as a community, when we go through a time of trouble, can be stronger than we would ever be as individuals, so long as we do not turn on each other, if we support each other and help each other. And that's part of that theme of understanding, just in a windy environment, in a windy world, whether that's serious or minor. How do we support and encourage? And God calls to us to be community in that way that we can support. But this theme of trees and wind also reminds me of another thing when we think of that issue, is that there's an experiment that was done for quite a few years back in a couple different versions, where they've created these biosphere domes, a self-enclosed community, where they were testing to say, how would it work for people, and to build a community in a place like the moon, or on Mars, or in a foreign planet, some other place. What we have there is how to survive in that realm. So they created this dome, and everything inside was recirculated, and it was air and water and plants and everything it would need. And many things they learned, many things were wonderful and useful, and they help us today, even before we might go to the stars in the way that we would hope to someday. But one of the interesting things they also learned was associated with some issues with trees, because they had trees inside this biosphere, and as those trees grow, some of them did not thrive. They had all the nutrients they would need, they had all the sun they would need, they didn't have any stressors, they didn't have insect populations and things that would, even in that particular case, cause disease the same way. As those trees started to grow, they would simply fall over. They couldn't hold up their own weight. As they pondered that question, the obvious elements of how do structures grow, how do they have strength, how do plants grow, cellular structures that hold themselves together. And that was the problem. See, these trees were inside this biosphere, and inside this biosphere there was no wind. Nothing. There was nothing resisting the tree. It didn't grow any strength. It's just like what would happen to astronauts when they go into space. They go into space, and they start to lose bone density, they start to lose muscle tone. There's no gravity, even the basics of gravity is so low that they are not pushing against it, and everything happens to their body, it becomes weaker. And that's what happened to these trees. By not having any resistance, they lost their strength. So as we ponder this question of what is it like in our lives to have no resistance, what's our strength? We may not always like our times of testing and our times of trial, and we wish things to be calm, and we wish things to get back to normal, or we wish things not to be so hard. But what is also always true is the corollary that those times of struggle, whatever they might be, any time in our life, whatever it is, we grow. And sometimes in that we also grow, we start to realize that there might be a reason for these things that we don't always see obviously first. But every struggle we have makes us stronger. Every struggle we have also helps us empathize with others that might be in the midst of the trouble of their own. Maybe not right then, maybe some other time, sometime in the future, sometime in other circumstances. But each one of those times that we struggle builds us up in ways that allow us to be able to do ministry, to be able to care for others, to be able to grow on our own, to realize things that we never had before. And that is part of what it means then to also sometimes have faith and say, how do we walk together through the time of trial, which makes us all stronger and opens up new opportunities